Welcome to the Zach Brown Show, the show that introduces you to old friends for the first time. I'm your host, Zach Brown. On this episode, I talk with Christine Boyle. Her story is raw, powerful, and full of unwavering faith. From deep struggles to a life of purpose and love, Christine's journey will challenge and inspire you. Our conversation, right after this.
Hi, you having a great time?
Looking for the perfect place to unwind after a long day? Welcome to the Brass Mallard, your neighborhood escape for great food, craft brews, and unforgettable vibes. At the Brass Mallard, we're all about the unexpected. No sports on the TV, just great conversation, delicious food, and an atmosphere that feels like home. From barbecue chicken and perfectly grilled steaks to our famous house-made rosemary bread, every bite is packed with flavor. Oh, and did we mention? We serve schnapps. Why? Honestly, we're not sure, but it's here, it's tasty, and we're all about it. Located at the corner of Laverne and Grady, we're right where your good times begin. Gather your friends, pull up a chair, and hear stories you've definitely heard before. The Brass Mallard, where flavor takes flight. So I've only known my guest today for just a short while, but I knew immediately that this was a person that was an absolute force and someone that I wanted to get to know. And also I knew that I wanted to introduce her to all of you, my listeners. So please welcome to the show, Christine Boyle.
Hi, Zach. Great to be on with you. Great to be with your audience today. So excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
You bet. And Christine, you've been, a public speaker for over 20 years, and that in itself is really awesome. And you just have such an incredible story to share. And so I just kind of wanted to talk with you about you and all that you've been through, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been doing speaking for a while, and I'll be honest with you, I just started in the last couple years, kind of being a little more intentional with that. But in the past, it's really been like when God just opens a door, I feel like I walk through it. But my very first speaking engagement, I'll tell you this, was in Orlando, Florida in 2004 in front of 3,000 people. And it was that. So I work for a ministry called Young Life. We're a global ministry, and I got invited to share my testimony in front of all their staff, and it was really incredible. But I'll share with you and your audience just the amazing, kind of crazy, unexpected journey that God has put me on. So I guess. Probably the most significant thing to start off by saying is that, like, I was raised in a church family home. So I grew up going to church, camp, party youth group, things like that. But kind of when I hit those high school years, I think some of the Christianity I grew up with was like very legalistic. Like if you're a Christian, you can't listen to this kind of music. You can't date these kind of guys. And that just didn't sit well with me. And so as I kind of got into my, junior, senior high school, I was just like, I do not want anything to do with Jesus, nothing. I wanted nothing to do with Christianity. And I feel like I actually spent a lot of time in high school telling people like I wasn't a Christian then, because I just wanted to distance myself so much. And kind of, I guess, having that kind of lifestyle, your typical teenage lifestyle, partying, boys, cheerleading, drinking, all those things. I ended up pregnant my senior year of high school, and that really rocked my world, as you can imagine. I found out I was pregnant actually a week before I was supposed to leave for college. And kind of the crazy part about that story is God was like always pursuing me, even though I was stiff-arming him and saying, I'm not a Christian, I don't want anything to do with this. That's how good he is, that even in the midst of that, he was still just always tugging on my heart. And so
it's like he's wanting to show you that it's like, it's not religion and rules, it's relationship that I want from you, Christine.
And I was kind of bargaining with God, which is, of course, in our silliness, we think we could do that. But I was kind of saying to God, okay, when I get to this Christian college, then I'll get my life right with you. Then I'll start following you. And so I had this whole plan in my mind of like, this is how this is going to work out. I'll be a Christian after high school, when I'm at a Christian college with 600 other Christian kids, and it's easy. And and so then I find out I'm pregnant, right? And in the midst of that, it was like, wait, God, I made this plan. We made this agreement, right? What am I going to do now if I'm pregnant? And I was 18, and so I didn't have to tell anybody I was pregnant. I did end up telling my mom I was pregnant. She was the only one I told.
And what was her response? Like, how was her relationship with you in that time?
Well, by the time I had told her I was pregnant, I had already made an appointment for an abortion. So I basically was coming to her saying, I'm pregnant and I have an appointment for an abortion. And I'll be honest with you, the night before I went to that abortion clinic, it was just God's grace that he was just breaking my heart. And I knew from my upbringing in the church that wasn't the answer. I knew that that wasn't the right thing to do. And I remember sitting with my mom and saying, if I can't do this, will you still support me? And her answer was no. Wow. And so, and that's really a huge part of how women end up in that situation is coercion and feeling like there's no hope. That there's no other options for them. And so that night, though, after having that conversation with my mom, I prayed to God, and my prayer to him was, Lord, keep me from doing this because I can't keep myself from doing this. Between having no clue what my life would end up like, not having the support of my mom, I wasn't even with the father of the baby. Like we had dated for a little bit. We were already broken up. And so, it was just everything you would define as probably a disaster. Right. And so I knew left up to me, like, this is what I had to do. And so that's why my prayer to God was, Lord, keep me from doing this. So we drove to that abortion clinic the next day into there, and they prepared me when I made the appointment that there would probably be Christians outside protesting, with signs and yelling things, and nobody was there, which to me was actually a little bit of a relief. But I went into that abortion clinic and I went through all the stages that they make you walk through to have the abortion. And the first stage was watching a video about abortion. And then the second stage was talking to a psychologist. And I sat with the psychologist and I just sobbed and I just said, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this, but I have to. And she offered me no alternative, no resources, nothing. Not, hey, come back in 36 hours, think about this, 24 hours, nothing. And so then the next step was the ultrasound. And I'm literally having the ultrasound, and the technician starts to have this puzzled look on her face. And she looks at me and she goes, you're too far along to have this abortion. She goes, you're 6 months pregnant.
Wow.
And I was just like, oh my gosh. And the tears that were tears of weeping turned into tears of relief. And I just said, I remember saying the words, God did not want me to do this. God did not want me to do this. And they ended up telling me that day that we can refer you elsewhere. You can still have the abortion. You just can't have it today. But in that moment, in that abortion clinic, like, I knew God had just answered that prayer. Like I knew God had just answered that prayer. Lord, keep me from doing this. Because the reality was I didn't look 6 months pregnant. I didn't feel 6 months pregnant. Nobody else other than my mom knew I was pregnant. And so I'm not sure what happened that day. All I know is Jesus met me in that clinic, and clinic that I finally surrendered my life to Christ. I just told God in there, I said, and it wasn't pretty. I grew up with, you need to be baptized, you need to do this, you need to do that. And honestly, my prayer in that abortion clinic that day was, God, my life is so screwed up and I need you. And
I think he loves those just very real and raw prayers.
Yes. And it's so crazy when I think back to that, Zach, because I think back to what if I had gone away to that Christian college? Like, what if I had gone there? There's a good chance I still may have never known Jesus, right? I mean, it's crazy to say that. Like, I could have went through all the legalistic things there too and never known him. And, the Bible tells us it's his grace that leads us to repentance. That's his kindness that leads us to repentance. And that's what I experienced that day was like, here I am, from my perspective and from a biblical perspective, abortion is a sin. It's not okay in the eyes of God. And so here I am about to commit this horrific sin, and God meets me right in the midst of that, in the midst of that. And if that's not grace, like what is? You know what I mean?
And I don't want to put any words in your mouth, and correct me if I'm wrong, but from sitting outside hearing this story, you are going into this very scary experience. You're in this transition. You're 18 years old. I mean, you're a kid, and you're about to go to high school, you go to college. You ask your mom, "Do you support me?" And she says no. You're not with the child of the father. And then you're going to this place, and the person's basically like, "I don't have any hope for you." Like, I imagine that you were feeling very on your own, very alone in this moment. Like there wasn't anybody standing with you in that moment.
Yeah. No, it was. Yeah. It was incredibly, incredibly lonely, scary, hard. I feel like if I had just one person speak life and hope, to me in those moments, like that would have changed, And so, even when I do speak and share my story publicly, one thing that God just really showed me is like, gosh, when you're a kid, like I had 2 trusted adults fail me in the matter of 24 hours. You know what I mean? And that just can wreck a kid. Like that can truly wreck a kid. And it's definitely given me a perspective of, just really recognizing again how women end up there. I'm obviously very pro-life, love standing for life and advocating for life and for the unborn. But I probably do it in a very different way than a lot of people do. And that's because I've been there. I know what it's like to walk through those doors. I know what it's like to feel hopeless. I know what it's like to feel so scared. And feel like, you have nobody walking alongside you. How in the world will you ever do this? How will you survive this? And so, so I definitely speak from a very different perspective than probably a lot of Christians do. Probably a lot of pro-life advocates do. So I know that wasn't, the answer. And so, so I do have deep convictions about that as well. But, the cool story is, or I should say the story gets better, that after I left that abortion clinic, and obviously I gave my life to Christ and had this new hope and just had experienced God in a way I'd never experienced him before. But, to your point, like I still had to go home and I had to tell the father of the baby he's going to be a dad in not 9 months, but 4 months, right? Like, so time was ticking. Had to go home and tell my family, had to go home. My cousin was going to be my roommate at college, had to tell her wasn't going away to college with her, had to eventually walk back in my home church, tell people why I wasn't going away to college. So it was a really, really hard time in my life. But 3 days after I left that abortion clinic, a friend of mine from high school literally showed up at my door. And he said, my girlfriend's mom is starting a Christian support group for teen moms in Cleveland. Will you meet her? And I was facing a lot of rejection just even in those 3 days. And so to hear that there's this woman who wants to meet me. I was like, sure. So I go to this restaurant and meet this woman, and her name is Betsy. And I had never heard of the ministry Young Life. Never had heard of it, but this was Young Life's ministry to teen moms starting in Cleveland. And she sat with me at a restaurant and she shared with me she had been a teen mom, that she ended up marrying not the father's baby, and he adopted her son. They went on to have 7 more kids together. So she's a mom of 8. She's working in full-time ministry. And she just looked at me, because my family at that time was still like, put the baby up for adoption, just have the baby, put the baby up for adoption. And she just looked at me that day and she just said, did you ever just think God wants you to have this baby? And she shared Jeremiah 29:11 with me, which I know is crazy popular now and has been for a while, but 24 years ago, I'd never heard it. And she said, for I know the plans I have for Christine, plans to prosper her and not to harm her, plans to give her a future and a hope. And she just spoke truth and life over me. And she just said, I'm going to love you. I'm going to walk alongside you. I'm going to do this with you. And she ended up mentoring me for years and did exactly what she said. She would have me come over her house. She would spend time with me. She was just pouring into my life, just teaching me about eventually how to be a wife, and just loved me when a lot of people were, again, walking away from my life. And she was there the day my daughter was born. And as you know, my daughter was born with a lot of disabilities and medical challenges, and she passed away 3 years ago, and at 21 years old. And my Young Life leader, Betsy, was there in the hospital 21 years later, the day Courtney died. And so this was a relationship that in the midst of brokenness, in the midst of a lot of people, again, walking away, God strategically put her in my life to love me and support me. And that's one of the reasons, like, I am so passionate about the ministry Young Life, because I'm like, who else is walking into the lives of teen moms and saying, we are just going to lavish the love of Christ on you in one of the hardest journeys you're going to walk through. So, and 4 months later, I had my daughter, Courtney. And like I said, she was born with a lot of challenges. So I was 18 and thrown into the world of medicine, doctors, hospitals. And it was hard. It was just the 2 of us. The father of the baby really didn't want any part in our lives. And so it was literally just the 2 of us. I didn't know she was going to be born with disabilities. And so I had moved out. My mom asked me to leave our house. And so I moved out on my own, thinking I'd be able to work and support us. And very quickly that changed when she was born and had a really high level of care. And so our lives were just crazy. But Betsy, the Young Life leader, she had introduced me to her church. And I was really praying for Christian friends, and God just blessed me with an amazing group of young adult group. And that's where I ended up meeting my husband. I met him when Courtney was 3 months old. Wow. We were friends for about 10 months and then, year. And then he asked me on a date, and most girls get excited when they get asked on a date. I cried because I was like, why the heck does he want any part of our lives? I was like, why? I have no idea. But yeah, and he just jumped right in head first and became her dad. He was everything I was praying for, hoping for. And it was an incredible journey just with him. And he became a father to her and just loved her like his own.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I want to touch on something, and this stands out to me. And I love what you said, where, that you said you're pro-life and you do support that, but you go about it in a different way because you walked it. And one of my favorite quotes is from Andrew Zimmern, the chef, that says, I want to make sure that I get this right, because it's kind of this reverse thing, that love without truth is hypocrisy, and truth without love is abuse.
Mm,
And so you can share the truth, but if you're not doing it out of love, it's not going to come across the way that you intend. And I think so many times we see people who are sharing, whether it be the truth or their truth, and it's not coming from a place of love. They just want to convince you or they want to be right. And it's so abrasive, but you're coming from
yes.
a place of love. And isn't that Jesus? I mean,
Yes.
Jesus goes into the moment and says, I'm going to bring you into my story. You're already in
Yep.
it. You don't realize it. You're just out there kind of wandering around.
Yeah. Yeah.
But to say, I want to share this with love, because if you don't, you're not going to receive it. You're just going to
Yep.
reject it. So for
Yep.
you to have walked that, you're not just like, I'm going to tell you why I disagree with you or what you're doing is wrong. You can
Mm-mm.
stand there and say, I was you. I know how
Yeah.
you're feeling. I
Yep.
know the feeling of loneliness. I know the feeling of rejection. I know how impossible this feels.
Yep. Yep.
And Christine, the first thing I noticed about you, I was like, oh my gosh, this person is a sunbeam. Like you just radiate, but it's
Oh,
the Lord in you. It's
yep.
your joy. It is your hope. It
Yep.
is faith in the face of adversity. You
Yes.
know, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be perfect, but you're going to get
Right.
through because he's with you. And so I just
Yes.
love your approach to this, very polarizing topic, you
Yes.
know? And I don't know
Yeah.
who's listening to this and who's gonna be, rah-rahing this and who's gonna be really upset about this.
Yeah.
Respectfully, I don't care where you stand on this. I just want you to hear a person that is sharing their story from a place of love. And
Yeah.
hopefully that opens up, healthy conversations.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And just to kind of add to that, every year I go to the abortion clinic in Cleveland where God saved me and saved Courtney. And before Courtney died, she would be with me. And I usually record just my testimony and I just stand there and I just feel like, gosh, I just want to put my feet on that ground there and just declare how good and how faithful God is, right?
Yeah.
And how he shows up in our lives when we don't deserve it. And he's just that kind and that loving and that gracious. And, I'm sure you can attest to this. Like there are just times where I'm like, Christians can be some of the cruelest people. They can be. And it's
Sheep
so
bite.
sad. Yes. It's so sad. And it's so hard to watch. And I've been on the receiving end of it as a disability mom at times. And it's like it is so painful. And so, for me, it's like I hope I'm the most loving person a pro-choice person meets. You know what I mean? Like I hope I'm not a beat you over the head with the Bible. That's not the kind of person I want to be. I want to be someone who extends to others the same grace that God has extended to me in my life. And I do think that's why my approach is different. And then I also will say one of my biggest calls to action as I share my testimony at that abortion clinic is for the church to do better, for Christians to do better. Like we have to love people well. And that, as you just heard, that is a huge part of my story, that this woman came into my life, met me where I was at, earned the right to be heard in my life. And it radically changed my family. It radically changed my life. And so I think we need to be better as followers of Christ, actually doing the things Jesus would do and meeting the broken where they're at. And so it's a joy to me. It's a joy to, as hard as that experience was in my life, I look at it as an absolute gift that I walked through that. And now I have this incredible story of God's faithfulness. And I'll be honest, like people aren't going to fight your story, right? So I could talk to a pro-choice person and share my story and this. And so that's a gift, I guess, to have those kind of experiences where you can still stand for truth. But you can also, do it in a way that represents Christ well. So, yeah.
And I love what you said. You said that she earned a voice. She earned a place there. You can't offer people hope unless they know you care about them. If you just walk up
Right.
again, it's going back. Here's this information. Here's this. Who are you? Why do I
Right.
believe what you're
Right.
saying? Why do I
Right.
care? Until you
Yes.
take the time with people, it's a process. And
It
so I think,
is.
we're in a world where people are very comfortable with getting on the internet, get on their little app, sitting from wherever they are and putting someone
Yep.
else that they've never met, possibly never will meet, or they have met, doesn't matter, put them on full blast and be like, well, there we go. That was effective. And then go back to what they're doing.
Yes.
It's like, calm
Yes.
down for a second. Do
Yes.
I know who
Yep.
you are? It's the
Yep.
funniest thing,
Yes.
just to
Yes.
sit there and go, I need to know that you care about me first. I know that I trust
Yep.
you, that you have my
Yep.
best intentions attached to these, you know, directions, these whatevers. And if we would all just slow down, honestly, just slow
Yes.
down for a second, get to know somebody
Yep.
and listen to them
Yes. Yep.
before we need to be I'm learning this in my 32 years to just be slower to speak, quicker to listen, and to kind of
Yep.
go, what are they actually looking for? What do they need? Not how quickly can I tell them what I know? You might
Yes.
realize
Yes.
halfway through your conversation, oh, what I had loaded, ready to fire off doesn't actually apply what they're saying because I took a second
Yes.
to listen.
To actually listen and actually get to know them. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Well, and so Young Life, the ministry that Betsy worked for, that I said I'd never heard of, obviously it impacted my life tremendously. That's who I work for now is Young Life. I work specifically with teenagers with disabilities and young adults. And that's the motto of Young Life. Like, you're trying to go out into the world and reach lost kids, whether it's teen moms, whether it's kids without disabilities, just typical teenagers, or again, I work with the kids with disabilities. And the things we do to earn the right to be heard in these kids' lives, I mean, it's crazy. It's wild. I mean, from playing games to just hanging out with kids. I mean, our Young Life leaders, if they're assigned to a certain high school, they're showing up, they're going into the student section at fall games. We just keep showing up in the lives of kids. Young Life's been around since 1941. It's effective.
Wow.
And so
I
I
didn't know
really
that.
try to apply that in, yes. We're in 120 countries. Yeah, I've been around since 1941. But it's this model of like going out into the world and how do you earn the right to be heard in the lives of kids who may never step foot into a church? You go where they go, you meet them where they're at. You enter into the messiness of their lives, but as you're saying, it's effective. That's what works with people. It's relationships. And so that's something that has so deeply impacted me that's something I really do try to carry over, not just in my job, but in life in general, that people just want to be seen. They just want to be known. They just want to be heard, right? Like, that makes sense in life. So
our conversation continues after this.
The vacation you've been waiting for is finally here. Make memories that last a lifetime. Cliche travel commercial statement. The ultimate escape is just a phone call away. Call 555-B-BAY for a free vacation guide.
All right.
Babambaboo Bay, a vacation like no other.
All right, let's get back to the show.
Now, let me ask you this to kind of slightly pivot. I have been around a number of people throughout my life who are parents of children with disabilities, or various things, whether that be physical, emotional. And I always look at them, and it's amazing to me because I just go, Lord, I don't know if I could do that. But I see them. I see people like you, and now the statement I just say is they're built different. They are built to handle this. So we are each equipped for what we have. You know what I mean? I think that some people go, well, I don't I don't want to be a missionary to Africa. I can never do that. It's like, don't you think if you were supposed to be a missionary to Africa, you would have that within you?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
someone such as yourself that, a mom of, children with extra needs, that it would be so easy for you to just go, I already do this. I put my time into this and I'm done. I've checked the box, whatever. But how is it that somebody such as yourself says, not only am I going to take care of mine, but I'm going to go out and love on the others? Where does that come from? Tell me where. I mean, I know a little bit about like kind of your upbringing and kind of growing up through all that, but like tell me where that comes from within you, that you have such a heart for this.
Yeah. Well, so I'll back up really quick and say, and I don't know if you know this, you probably do. I'm sure you said you listened to a couple of my episodes of my podcast. So
which I want to talk about later, but we'll come back to it.
So Kevin's adopted. So I went to El Salvador, started doing missions work there, met who ended up being my son, met Kevin, and God made it abundantly clear Kevin was supposed to be in our family. And Zach, I will tell you that Dan and I went kicking and screaming because we were like, Lord, we have enough on our plates. Courtney is a lot, and we were very content. I mean, we literally made a list of pros and cons, like why not to adopt Kevin, why to adopt Kevin. And the list of cons was like 20 times longer. And so I just want to be very transparent that like, our call to adopt and ways to adopt Kevin was really not emotional. It wasn't, fertility issues, anything like that. It was literally God saying like this kid, he was very sick, very disabled. And so I do think there is, that God equips us, God empowers us, God gives us these characteristics that help us to do the things he's called us to do. At the same time, I would say for us, like in that situation, for example, it came down to scripture and it came down to none of these reasons we had listed. My husband said it perfect. He said, none of these reasons are good enough to stand before God and give someday. Like, this is what we're called to do as Christians, to be the hands and feet of Christ and bring restoration to this little boy. And
people are tucking their toes in.
And God was so faithful in that. I mean, he was so faithful. And now fast forward 12 years, I look at my son and I think I could have missed that.
Yeah.
Like if it was left up to me, to my heart, my wicked heart, my, fleshly desires, right? I could have missed that. And that's very humbling to recognize I have this amazing son. I've got to watch God just heal him, restore him, change his life. And I've loved it. And to know like you could have missed that. And again, just God's grace again, right? God's grace of like, I'm going to drag you to that cross. Like I'm going to drag you to that place of adopting this little boy. But anyway, so I say that to say, as my daughter became a teenager, what I realized was I wanted her to have what I had with Young Life, which was other Christians pouring into my life. And so I knew that Young Life had a ministry for teenagers with disabilities called Capernaum, which is named after the city where Jesus did his first miracle. And so I was like, I'm going to start this. I'll go on staff. I'll start this in Cleveland because that's what special needs moms do. They see the deficit and they fix it. We're fixers. We don't take no for an answer. So that's, I would say I am a very tenacious person. And I think being a parent, you do have to fight for a lot of things. I hate to say that, but you have to advocate like really hard for a lot of things. She needs this, her friends need this. And so I was just like, I'm going to go on staff and I'm going to start this in Cleveland. And so, yes. So I have a house full of kids with disabilities, multiple times a month, discipling them, doing Bible study with them, hanging out with them. And the cool thing is, in the world of disability, we either overlook people with disability, like in the church, I would say, we either overlook people with disabilities or we don't think they need to know Jesus. And so what I came to realize is like these kids, they need to know Jesus just as much as any of us need to know Jesus.
Yeah.
And so, so that's really where my why comes from and why I hang out with these kids all the time and earn the right to be heard in their lives and their parents' lives. Because I just know that they can be discipled. They, when we have the Great Commission of go and make disciples, people with disabilities aren't excluded from that, right?
Yeah.
They need to know about Jesus just as much as anyone else. We want them in heaven too. And so, so for me, it's like, and I'll be honest, I'd rather hang out with my friends with disabilities than my friends without disabilities any day of the week. Like they're way more fun. I laugh way more. Like we just have a blast. And the cool thing too is like with the model of Young Life, you really are just building true and authentic relationships, friendships. So, I mean, almost on a daily basis, I'm getting text messages, Facebook messages from our friends. We go to the movies, we go get Chick-fil-A, we just hang out, we'll go to Starbucks. Like, this isn't a pity model type ministry. It's like, we really want to walk alongside you and be a friend, a trusted adult in your life. And so it's different and it's very cool. And I know there's really not a lot of other ministries doing what we do. And so for me, it's like an absolute joy and privilege to get to do this. And it's changed my life. I mean, it's absolutely changed my life. It changed my daughter's life. I mean, and Kevin's life. I mean, really to watch these kids with disabilities that normally wouldn't have a lot of community and a lot of true friendships, like to see that actually not be the case and that they have this lively social life, a lot of friends, and they're growing in their faith. Like it's really unique. It's not something you see a lot. I mean, a lot of kids and young adults with disabilities live in isolation a lot of times, especially as they get to that age 22 when they're out of high school and all that. And so so it's really awesome. And then we just launched an adult disability ministry because all of our kids are too old for Young Life now. It only goes to age 22. So we just launched that in January. So I know I don't have the capacity to do any of this, but it's just like you have one life. You have one life to live, right? And I just look at it and it's like, if the Bible tells me to do it, I'll just do it. I don't know how, but I'm going to just do it. So,
you and I met at Lou Mangello's Momentum down here in Orlando, and they had asked us to come up with like a mission statement or an elevator pitch and like one little whatever. And you're at the table next to me. And I remember you said something and it stopped me in my tracks. And I don't have it verbatim, but I have summed it up to a number of people that I know in ministry that you said something along the lines and fix me as I go, but it was basically to disciple those because without them, our churches are disabled. So it was this beautifully put thing. My jaw dropped. So could you just say it in the proper way?
Okay. I don't remember exactly what I said because I kind of came up with it in that moment. But the gist of it was, if people with disabilities aren't present in our churches, then our churches are disabled. And I have a really, really strong passion for the church to be our churches to be places of belonging for families like mine. We've had some really hard experiences the last 3 years with the church. And there's times where I've walked away from situations and I've said, thank God we know Jesus. Thank God I know the Bible and know that that is not a reflection of Jesus. But my heart aches for any family who has walked through some of the things we've walked through that doesn't know that. And so our passion is to equip the local church. So one of the ministries we just launched this month is the Invited In Church Network. We're going to be inviting 120 churches in Cleveland on March 20th to come to a totally free luncheon. It'll be the first of 4 luncheons to receive disability educating, equipping, encouragement, and just help them to understand just how to be prepared for a family like mine when they walk through the doors. So,
wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. So we're trying to be part of the solution. We've experienced some hard things, but we're trying to to help be part of this solution. And that's what we came up with from seeing another organization that's doing something similar.
The Zach Brown Show continues after this. I love coffee. It's part of my morning routine. Without it, I just don't feel like myself. Allow me to introduce you to the official coffee of The Zach Brown Show. Located in Columbia, Tennessee, Oak Hill Farm Coffee Roasters offers a delicious variety of roasts and blends. Every bag of coffee you buy will help mission and humanitarian projects all around the world. What's better than a cup of coffee? A cup of coffee that helped make a difference. Oak Hill Farm Coffee Roasters. Wake up, drink coffee, and go do something great. And enough of that. Back to the show.
So in addition to you doing all of these things with Young Life and just being a mom and a wife and having, your own life, you have your own podcast, Invited In. Tell me about it.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, as you just said, I met you at Momentum. And this is really funny. So I'm going to tell you this story. So my husband is a big Lou Mangiello fan.
Okay.
I don't know anything about Lou. I still don't know much about Lou. But no, in all seriousness, after our daughter passed away, my husband was like, I'm going to sign you up for Momentum. So my very first Momentum 3 years ago, everyone's standing up and they're doing their introductions and everyone's, oh, Lou Mangiello. And I stand up and I'm like, I don't really know who you are. My husband signed me up. So I always tell him I keep him humble because I'm like, I still have never listened to his podcast. I really don't know much about him.
That's so great.
I know it's pretty funny, but obviously I've gotten to know him better over the last few years. But
yeah.
But I went to that Momentum, and I guess just so your listeners understand, like it's a conference for like 50 entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and so my husband was just like, "You need to start a podcast. You need to start a podcast," because he knows I love speaking and all of that, and so I went and I was encouraged, but I didn't really do much with it that first year, and I think it's just because I was in like the height of. We're grieving. We had just lost our daughter a handful of months earlier. And so then the next year I went back and that's when I was like, I'm doing this. And I literally like bought my domain name there at Momentum and
Nice.
Came home. And I think we were there in October, December, like 4th, I launched my first episode.
Wow.
And I'll be honest, I couldn't have done it in that room. Just because I had never podcast. I still don't listen to podcasts really. So I'm not a technology person. And so to me, this was like speaking a different language. And so it was hard, but I couldn't have done it without that group of people at Momentum to not just cheer me on, but also to actually help me with like, how the heck do you do this?
Yeah.
And so I launched it. And right now I do 2 episodes a month. And it's about disability and faith. So it's called Invited In with Christine Boyle, where disability and faith meet. And so my goal in it was really just to share stories about my journey being a disability mom, but then also to bring guests on who work in disability, specifically faith-based disability ministries and things like that. And it's been incredible. I'll be honest, probably my biggest surprise has been people who listen, who have no connection to disability at all. That's been really fun. Like someone will tell you they listen and you're kind of like in your head, like, why do you listen? I wonder why.
Why?
Like what draws you to this? Maybe I should actually start asking. But it's encouraging. And there's been a lot of tears, a lot of technology issues that just make you cry because it's so hard sometimes. But I love having a platform where you can just share and you could just share about life and about, again, the things that we've experienced, the things we've seen, the things we've walked through. And it's been a joy. It's cool to, like I said earlier, when we started, how with my speaking, it's always been, I haven't been a real like go-getter with that. It's just kind of, if I get invited to a church or to a conference, I'll speak, trying to get more intentional with that. But this is kind of cool because it's like you kind of have this platform, right? And it's
Yeah.
yours. Like you said at the beginning of this podcast. I don't care. It's my podcast. I can do what I want. I can say. And so I love that. I love that you get to just, it's yours. It's your space. And so it's been really great. Again, it's hard work. I don't know that people realize how hard, doing a podcast, editing, doing all that stuff on your own is. But I do feel like I've put a lot of time and energy into it as well. But as far as like going, I was just at PodFest in Orlando and have gone to that the last 2 years. So it's like you're always trying to do better, learn more. So I'm definitely not an expert at all, but I do enjoy it. It's been great. Yeah.
So I feel like you've shared like your heart, you've shared your mission, it's like sharing the love, sharing like your equipping. And I think it's so beautiful. Like that's you're showing love. And I love what you said, because this is something that I think of, especially as I go along farther in life, that you're like, you've had situations that have not been great, but know that it's just humans. It's if you knowing, okay, that didn't represent Jesus well, but I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Like we'll try again somewhere else or whatever.
Yes.
And I genuinely feel for those people. And my emotion is, oh no, don't judge us all based on that. Like that, they don't represent all of us. Please don't,
I know.
So for your kind of outlook on this whole thing, I think that's so cool that it's because it goes back to you've been there and you want to communicate the truth through love, truth in love. Like that's so incredible. And if I was to kind of wrap all this up into like one bow to ask you a question, Christine, it is all said and done. The Lord is calling you home. What do you want your legacy to be?
Wow, that's a big question. Probably, I feel like life has been hard. It has not been an easy life at all. It has been full of so many things. I never would have raised my hand and said, God, pick me to do this. It has been so many challenging things. And yet that is where I've experienced God the deepest. That is what has made my faith what it is walking through those times where you have no idea what tomorrow's going to look like, or you lose a child, or, things like that are really, really hard. And so I hope my legacy is that I persevered, that I ran my race and I ran it, with perseverance and just following after Christ hard and never giving up on the call to make disciples and love the least of these, and to bend over backwards to do what we can to alleviate suffering in this world. Like that's huge to me. That would be what I would hope my legacy would be, is that I didn't sit a lot, that I worked my butt off to bring God's kingdom to earth, to make his will be done here. I mean, we pray that in the Lord's Prayer, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And I think as Christians, sometimes we forget that God really does expect us to be his hands and feet in a really broken, messy world. And so that I hope that's my legacy. Yeah.
I love that. That's so cool.
Thanks for asking me that, because it helps me to stop and go, whoa, what do I want that to be? So thank you. I don't think I've ever been asked that.
Oh, fun.
Yes.
So for all of our viewers at home or in the car or wherever you are, I don't know, how can our people find you? How can they be a part of what you're doing? I mean, all the things.
All the things. Okay. Well, so you can go to my website, ChristineBoyle.com. That tells my story, connects you to my speaking. And then my podcast is on there as well. But you can also find my podcast on all podcast platforms, Spotify, all that good stuff. Apple Podcasts. And again, it's Invited In with Christine Boyle, where disability and faith meet. And then our new ministry that we just launched is called Invited In Disability Ministry. On Facebook, we're just Invited In. So if you look that up, you can follow all the cool things we're going to be doing in Cleveland with our adult friends with disabilities. And then if you want to know more about Young Life, you can go to younglife.org and learn more about Young Life. And then we also have Young Life Capernaum Cleveland South Facebook page, so you could see that too. So yeah, those are the best ways to find me. I'm on Instagram too, and I'm on Facebook, Christine Boyle, and then Christine.a.boyle on Instagram. So yeah, you could follow me all those places. So
You're everywhere.
yeah, I would love to connect. I'd love to connect with any of your listeners, and yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Christine, thank you so much for just sharing your heart, sharing your story. I know that there's someone who's listening that they needed that. We don't know what they're going through, but just thank you for being here and just for being vulnerable and just for being you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks for the invitation. It was so great to get to spend more time with you and get to, just have this conversation. I loved it. So thank you.
Thank you so much for joining our conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. If you did, please tell a friend. And if you take just a moment to leave a 5-star review on your favorite streaming platform, you can also share this or any other episode with a friend. I also want to thank our guest, Christine Boyle, for taking time with me. You can listen to her podcast, Invited In with Christine Boyle, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow her on Instagram at christine.a.boyle. The Zach Brown Show is produced by me, Zach Brown, and Corey Jess, and is part of the Zach Brown Network. Our album art is made by Luis Lopez. Our outro music is Nurse by Corey Jess. You can follow him on Instagram at corey.jess.productions. You can follow the show on Facebook or Instagram at The Zach Brown Show.